How did you enjoy your week 8?
Well, okay. I'll be honest. This was not my favorite. I had to sit there and as someone who had money on Penn State, I had to sit there and endure 3.5 hours of whatever that was on offense. Very and that was very frustrating. That was very frustrating. There was a lot of really competitive games, a ton of good storylines that came out of this week. All kinds of interesting things happened. It's just yeah. Should we just go ahead and can we get into Penn State, Ohio State? That's all I really want to talk about right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a perfect place to start because it was the noon slate Saturday. That was the biggest game of the week. Ohio State wins the game 20-12. Yeah, there's lots of places to go, but what is your initial, like, where do you want to go first on this one,
Okay,
Ashton?
so I'm going to go ahead and before I start in on everything else, go ahead and say that Ohio State's defense is improved.
Yes,
They are better than they were last year. And by the way, we said that, a couple of weeks ago. We saw
very
that like,
good.
okay, this team has very much improved year over year. Now, we're going to put that on the shelf and put that away. We're not even going to talk about that anymore. Ohio State has a good defense. We know this. Penn State's offense was so unimaginative. I mean, okay, Penn State has the talent to hang with Ohio State. You won't be able to convince me otherwise. They were 0 of 15 on third downs until that last garbage time drive. I'm not counting that. That was prevent defense. I'm not counting. You do not get credit for that. The game was over. That was garbage time. They were 0 of 15 on third downs. Drew Aller threw the ball 42 times. He was not good at all. I think it was on play calling. A lot of it was. Why? I mean, why have a 5-star quarterback if you don't let him throw it 15 yards down the field?
Yeah.
What's the point of having a dual threat if you don't get him out on the edge with some RPO stuff and put the linebackers in a bind and make the safeties tackle him? Like there's no point in having that. They ran the ball for 49 yards total, and I mean they had, I think between Singleton and Allen they only carried it 9 times each. Like that's not enough. Like they were actually Singleton had 48 yards on 9 carries. Like like that's actually a pretty decent average. I mean that's quite good. But nine carries is just not enough. You can't throw the ball 42 times. I can keep going in this. I'm just gonna hang on here just for a little bit. We knew this. Like Penn State fans knew what was coming. And I was the sucker who bought into the fact that no, they've learned. Penn State will surely learn. They're not going to come in and just try to be vanilla against Ohio State. They're going to come in and they're going to throw haymakers because that's what you have to do when you're on the road against a good football team. You have to go win. They're not just going to roll over. You have to go beat them. And yeah, it was the coaches, I think, coached scared. The quarterback definitely played scared.
Mm-hmm.
I think Penn State's defense is excellent. I mean, that defense should be upset at the lack of offense that they came equipped with because I thought that defense played quite well all day long. There was I'm sure you probably saw the scoop and score that got called back that
Right.
really would have changed the game. I mean, tremendously. That game kind of gets flipped. If that fumble, that was a 14-point penalty, really, because Ohio State scores just shortly after. Yeah, there was again. I don't root for Penn State or Ohio State. I don't care about either one of those. I had money on Penn State because I thought Penn State had taken the steps in the offseason and done the work. They had recruited at a level. They finally they could keep up with Ohio State. I thought they could keep up with Ohio State. I thought they had closed the gap, and I think I was right too. But the coaches absolutely blew that.
You touched on something a little bit ago where you said you have to go beat them. It reminded me of like not this year's Notre Dame game against Ohio State, but last year's Notre Dame Ohio State game where Notre Dame is clearly just out there like we just got to run the ball or take deep shots, but we're not really going to trust our quarterback to put it in tight windows or anything. Like we're gonna. And obviously it was a little different because Alar threw the ball 42 times. It was a little bit different than that, but it was very much playing not to lose. And everything, like all the throws were either deep shots or like short little dink and dunk or like trying to throw across the field to the far hash and put it like where you had to throw a perfect fade route that was 7 yards down the field somehow. And there was just nothing across the middle of the field, like places where you would think you could trust your 5-star quarterback to make a good throw, but also one that's a little easier to make than that long throw across the field where you have to drop it perfectly over the defender when he's playing tight coverage. It just didn't, I don't know. It did not look, like you said, creative. It looked like they were scared to throw interceptions, which good for him. He didn't throw an interception, but he also completed 18 out of his 42 passes for like 4.5 yards per attempt or something, which is garbage. That's terrible. Props to Ohio State's defense. I mean, you kind of put it on the shelf and said we're not going to talk about it, but their defense is legit. Like they kind of, is it bad to say that Ohio State kind of looks like Michigan now? like they had to remodel their game after Michigan after losing to them the last 2 years.
So what you're saying that they have someone watching Penn State games, previous early this season? Is that what you're saying? I don't
Very
know.
Possibly, yeah, something like that. Ohio State's offense, by the way, like we talked about Drew Allard not looking all that good.
Right.
Kyle McCord didn't look all that good either. Yeah. Missing some throws. Thank goodness they had Marvin Harrison, or as Gus Johnson kept saying, Maserati Marv.
Did that irritate you? That got on my nerves pretty quick.
It was a little too much. I love Gus Johnson. It feels like he's not quite as good as he used to be. Like he kind of falls. And by the way, they got Maserati Marv, but the problem is they got Honda McCord throwing to him. So
yeah, fair enough.
Ohio State, like, if you're looking to win the national title, which of course they are, they have almost as good a shot as anybody. I think they're probably not as good as Michigan and Georgia. They have a shot, and I think you have to feel better about them than maybe you did in the offseason, just because you know that they can win ugly games. Like they just did it right here. Like they would have killed for this kind of performance against Michigan last year, which obviously they did not get. Now, I think they're going to clearly be an underdog against Michigan.
Yes.
Doesn't mean they can't beat them though.
Right. To the Ohio State point is the physicality is definitely improved from them. Now, Ohio State neither one of these teams really ran the ball. Like we can kind of point to that too. Like Ohio State didn't run the ball, but like to be fair, Ohio State hadn't really been running the ball all season. Penn State had, and they got shut down, and that's a credit to Ohio State. Something I was going to come back to, I couldn't really get over it when I was watching the game, was there were certain times, especially in the first half, where Ohio State was playing zero high. Like they had the safeties were tucked up all the way, and Penn State was still trying to run and throw 5-yard out routes off of that. Yeah. Like there was no threat of you completing a ball behind me. None. They were completely, they disrespected Penn State's receivers, and apparently they had good reason to. Like they completely shut them down. That was with Ohio State's backup cornerback. Is it Denzel Burke didn't even play in this game, or very little. I don't think he played at all. Yeah, I don't know. I was surprised at just how okay Penn State seemed to be with losing by 8. Like I think James Franklin almost seemed like he definitely called the game like he was okay with losing by 8. I don't know. It was tough to watch. As someone who was invested in this one, you remember your losses more than you remember your wins, I guess, when you're a gambler. And I am. So yeah, it was tough to see. Ohio State was no doubt the better football team.
Yes.
Like without question. They were the more complete team, and the coaching, it was a huge mismatch in coaching. I noticed that, and that was just very obvious. Penn State folded, I think.
Yeah. I felt a little bit different about this game afterward than I felt after the Notre Dame Ohio State game. They kind of feel similar, and Notre Dame and Penn State have some somewhat similar profiles, built on defense and a running game.
Right.
I felt like Notre Dame should have won that game against Ohio State. I did not feel at any point like Penn State should have won that game. And some of it was execution, some of it was coaching, but it felt like the right team won, for sure.
Yeah, you replay this game 10 times. I mean, Ohio State wins 8. Like
Yeah.
I think they win at least 8 of those times. Yeah, the Ohio State was the better team by far. And by the way, this sets up that Ohio State Michigan game, sets a lot up there. I don't even want to talk about Michigan Penn State right now. Like I can't. I'm not emotionally at a place to talk about Penn State playing Michigan. Michigan's going to smoke them. Like if you try to run into a tight box against Michigan, like Ohio State's good at it. Michigan's even better at stopping that. Like Michigan's even more physical and takes more pride in stopping the run. So yeah, that just seems like a total mismatch right there. I don't really want to get into that. Penn State clearly the third best team in the East right now.
Yeah, I think it's very likely we see both Michigan and Ohio State in the playoff again this year.
You think so?
Okay,
but hang on. Here's the counterpoint. Like, there's so many other good teams. Like, say Florida State ends up undefeated. Which,
yeah,
like,
it depends on what else happens for sure.
Right.
I'm just saying that let's assume for a second Michigan beats Ohio State by a touchdown. Ohio State will be able to point to wins against good Notre Dame and Penn State teams and 11-1 record. Like, they will have a very good resume. Most years that resume will probably be good enough. The only way it's not is if you have a bunch of other really good conference champions with one or fewer losses, and that could happen.
That's what I was going to say. Say like a one-loss Oregon, redeems themselves against Washington and gets in, and then like Florida State's undefeated, Georgia's undefeated. Like, you know what I mean? Then like if Michigan's in, then like someone's left out. But no, I do agree. I think Michigan and Ohio State right now are two of the 4 best teams in college football right now. I think Ohio State could make that argument for sure.
I think on the flip side, though, Michigan almost has to win out because they won't have as good of a resume because they're at that point. Let's say they lose to Ohio State. At that point, their only good one really will be Penn State. They don't have that Notre Dame non-conference game to fall back on, which Ohio State does. Which makes the resume look a lot better.
Fair enough.
All right, let's move on. That's a lot about one game. Oklahoma beat UCF 31-29. They definitely messed around a little bit in this one. And UCF, I mean, this is what Gus Malzahn does. Like he frightens teams that are better than him.
Yeah.
He did it for years against Alabama at Auburn. I still can't decide if Oklahoma is like legit playoff good or are they just like a top 10 team that happened to get Texas?
Okay, but I mean, I think that is like that's what a lot of playoff teams are this year. Like there's a lot of teams that are kind of that way. Like like you could kind of say the same about Florida State. Like they're a top 10 team that just happened to pick off LSU at the beginning of the season. And caught Clemson in a down year. You know what I'm saying? Like you could kind of make that case for almost anyone.
Everyone's flawed this year,
right. I think so. Like at least right now, like there is no 19 LSU, no 2020 Alabama. Like we're not seeing any of those teams or the Clemson teams or even the Georgia teams from the last 2 years. It's definitely more parity, I would think so far.
Mississippi State 7, Arkansas 3.
Yes.
I feel like you and I both have kind of a soft spot for Arkansas, and it's just been a rough year. They fired Dan Enos Sunday afternoon, their offensive coordinator, who didn't make it a full season after being hired. Any thoughts on this game or big picture for either program?
Not really. I think like Arkansas is in real trouble. That was one move where we're gonna fire the offensive coordinator to throw some red meat to the fan base, I guess. I don't know, just to get them off our backs for at least a couple of more weeks and maybe something happens. I don't know if Sam Pittman survives this offseason. I don't know if Shane Beamer at South Carolina survives this offseason. Like there's a couple of them that, so right now, currently, we don't have any big time jobs open. Like there is no one. Like we thought we'd have some firings early on, right? Like we thought maybe it might be Neil Brown.
Michigan State.
Okay, fair enough. But and that one maybe not performance related, but or maybe it was. But anyway, they fired him for cause. So whatever. But as far as like jobs that are not under investigation that are open, we thought maybe West Virginia would be one, or even there was some Houston buzz that Houston would open up. Like Arkansas is probably going to be the first. I don't know. Like I think that could come sooner than later. And I think it's actually a pretty good job too.
I think you could make the argument that because there are so few huge programs that are looking like they're probably going to lose their coach or fire their coach this offseason, Arkansas could jump in the coaching cycle where there's only a couple decent jobs available, where maybe they get one of the top 2 candidates out there, which could make sense, I guess. But I think we both also like Sam Pittman and the job he's done for the most part. But yeah, he lost 2 really good coordinators this offseason, and that doesn't – you can't just replace guys like that at Arkansas. It's a good school, but it's not good enough to just replace guys, like Kendall Briles and I forget the defense coordinator's name who then got the UNLV job, but like really good coordinators that really kind of one of the main reasons we gave him praise his first couple of years was because of the coordinator hires he made, and that's it's been tough for him to replace those. All right, let's move on. Just a bunch of scores here. Wake beats Pitt 21-17. Oklahoma State beats West Virginia 48-34. Wisconsin beats Illinois 25-21. Alabama beat Tennessee 34-20. This was obviously one of the games of the week. Huge rivalry there. Tennessee, it wasn't necessarily their game to lose at halftime, but they were up 20-7 and then got blanked 27-0 in the second half. What happened here, Ashton?
A game that I watched, a lot of. This was my primary watch in the 3:30 window. I love this game for obvious reasons. It's especially after what happened last year. I think that's right. I think this was their game to lose. 20-7 at halftime. The touchdown that Milton threw in the corner of the end zone at the end of the first half, it was like this is Tennessee's night. Like this. Alabama's not coming back from this. Not with Jalen Milroe, they're not. It was 20-7 at halftime, but it easily could have been 28 or 35 even. Tennessee had a lot of possessions. They settled for field goals instead of touchdowns in the first half. It could have been 28-7 at halftime. It probably should have been 28-7 at halftime. They had a lot of first and goals, and they ended up kicking field goals, and it was a 2-score game. Alabama comes out immediately and scores first possession in the second half. And like the whole thing changed then. And has Alabama kind of found something? Like, is Alabama sneaky finding themselves here? Like, is Jalen Milroe, is that going to work for Bama this year?
Define work, but yes. I mean, that defense is really good. It really is. They obviously figured it out at halftime and shut Tennessee down in the second half. Milroe is not a good quarterback, but he throws a good deep ball and he's a good runner. Yeah. And they're still not a good running team. Their offensive line is not good at run blocking. Right. But when you have a quarterback like that, he will get you a few tough yards here and there. Now, this game, that wasn't the game where he really did it. But he could throw the deep ball. And Jermaine Burton, Isaiah Bond, they got a few receivers that they're not great, but they're better than what we have been seeing from Alabama the last year and a half or so. So, they can win a lot of games putting up 27 points, I think. I think that could happen. So
did you watch much of this game? Okay, so I did, and I absolutely felt like Tennessee got screwed by the refs. I really did. I actually thought I saw it a bunch this weekend, not just in college. Your Indianapolis Colts. That was rough, man. It was a bit of a ref show at times between Tennessee and Alabama. And you can't just complain about the refs, because at the end of the day, Tennessee was 0 of 3 on fourth downs. They were all 4th and 1s, I believe, and they were all very gettable. I mean, and that change, that's with the lead, by the way. This is in the first half with the lead, early second half, still with the lead. You have a chance to really kind of, take control of this game, and you turn it over right there, gives Alabama short field, and they score quickly afterwards. It happened, a couple of times. Those are turnovers pretty much. Those pretty much become turnovers for you. So if I was a Tennessee fan, yes, I would be upset and frustrated about the officials in
Right.
that game. I'm sure they are, but the officials didn't make it 27-0 in the second half. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like the officials didn't make your defense completely stop playing. So
Right. Speaking of officials, Minnesota beats Iowa 12-10.
Okay. I did you watch this one too?
I didn't watch the whole thing. I obviously saw the ending there where Cooper DeJean returns the punt for a touchdown, but then they deem that he made a fair catch signal or something. I don't have a whole lot to say about that, I guess. It's such a judgment call. Maybe you have a strong opinion on it. I don't have a strong opinion on it. Iowa in the second half had like 8 yards. You can't really say too hard that you got screwed if you had 8 yards in the second half. Is that too bold to say?
They had 11 yards rushing on 28 attempts.
Oh,
11 yards rushing on 28 attempts. They did start completing some passes to receivers though. Like Deacon Hill completed 10 passes this week, which is up from his usual 6. So like we're going places. I think he did fumble twice. To that fair catch on the punt. Cooper DeJean is a stud muffin, by the way. Like
yes.
that dude, he is Iowa's best offense, and like he just happens to play defense. And special teams, I guess. Anything but offense. But I mean, put him on offense. Like, why not? Like we see Travis Hunter do it.
10 plays a game at least, yeah.
Nothing to lose there. None at all. He's clearly good in the open field. I thought that he clearly was signaling at his guys to get away from the ball.
Yeah, he was.
And okay, isn't it also correct that even if you fair catch a ball and it bounces, you may then return it? Or did I miss something there? Because that has happened.
That's right. I'm not sure.
No. Okay. I have. Yeah. We can figure that one out later. I'm like 95% sure that he could have, that was a live ball upon the punt landing and that he could have returned that. I thought that's what he was doing. I thought he was signaling at his guys to get away. His hand was not over top of his head. It was kind of off to the side more. And yeah, it is a judgment call, I guess. The call from the official was I think he said, was it an illegal fair catch signal? Or it was something to do with his fair catch signal, and that's why the play was whistled dead. And I don't even know that rule. I hadn't even heard that call made before. Either way, Iowa's offense was not good enough for you to complain about losing this game. I had the over in this game personally. It was not in one of the locks. It was a principal play. You figure when the number goes to 30.5, like that's the lowest I've ever seen. Why not? But no, it was under and comfortably under. We had no chance of going over in this game.
Yeah, I had the under as one of my locks and felt quite good about it the entire time.
Good for you.
Yeah. Mizzou beats South Carolina 34-12. Mizzou is now 7-1. They are rolling right along. They're good on both sides of the ball. This is a really good team, Ashton.
I think so. They have I'm not going to call him the most underrated receiver in college football, but Luther Burden is really, really good. That guy is excellent. He's just a true sophomore. He has to come back again next year. I mean, he's going to be an All-American. Like he's that kind of good. The quarterback play has actually been impressive. And so you remember a couple of weeks back when they beat Kansas State on the 61-yarder, right, at their place. They have a walk-off 61-yard field goal. Kansas State has actually won a lot of games since then and is a competitor now in the Big 12, kind of, just because, they don't have many conference losses. Missouri's, like, that makes Missouri's win, like, that's probably Missouri's maybe best win so far. Their one loss, like, at LSU,
Kansas
that was
State, I would say, yeah.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that Missouri's best loss. I mean, Missouri's only loss was to LSU, and that was kind of a coin flip game. Yeah. I'm with you. Like, I think Missouri is really good. Missouri has to go on the road next week to Athens, to our place.
Yeah.
We'll find out. Like, I'll say that, we'll find out. That's going to be on national TV for everyone to see. I'm a little worried though. Like, I think Missouri they're definitely going to score points. That offense is pretty good. And I think the defense is solid too.
their last 3 games then are Tennessee, Florida, and at Arkansas. I think 2-1 is probably most likely. Like,
yeah,
it's very possible we're looking at a 9-3 Missouri team here at the end of the season, which is obviously a great year for them. So props to them.
Yeah.
South Carolina, it is what it is. Like you mentioned earlier, you think Shane Beamer might potentially be on the hot seat. I don't really think that. I just think this is going to be a down year. And I'm almost done just talking about South Carolina this year. Like, as far as big picture stuff goes, they're not all that good. They're pretty bad this year. I'm also not all that down on them long term as for their standards. Like, is Shane Beamer going to win national titles at South Carolina? No, probably not. But I think he's going to make bowl games more often than not. Take it or leave it.
Okay, but isn't that kind of the same thing that we're saying with Sam Pittman at Arkansas? Like, both of these teams are kind of in the same place. They both kind of got their roster or their coaching roster kind of picked clean in the last offseason, right? Both South Carolina and Arkansas. And there's more like I think it's true with both Arkansas and South Carolina is that you're not going to win national championships. Like, it is okay just to elevate the programs. Now, that being said, this is the SEC, and I don't think the fan bases are going to be okay with it. So, like, that's why they get fired. Is it just and is it fair? Certainly not with Pittman at Arkansas that you're on the hot seat. Beamer, I don't know. Like, he broke his foot because he got mad, a week ago because he kicked something in the locker room, broke his foot, whatever. Stuff like that, I think actually kind of matters. I think some decision makers will use that as a reason to say, like, oh, he's out of control. Like he's struggling with control. And if South Carolina happens to get embarrassed by Clemson, who is going to need that win, right?
True.
Clemson's going to need that win against South Carolina. Suddenly, South Carolina fans, I think it's going to be a very rough offseason. And I think his seat will at least be moderately warm this offseason. I really think that.
Yep. Nebraska beat Northwestern 17-9. I only mention it just because Nebraska's won 4 in a row, I believe, and has an outside shot at actually winning the Big Ten West. So just something to keep an eye on. Oregon beats Washington State 38-24. Not a whole lot to talk about here other than just avoiding the letdown loss, avoiding losing to Washington 2 weeks in a row. So good for Oregon. They got more big games coming up. We'll talk about that soon. Let's see. Texas beats Houston 31-24.
Yeah.
This might have been the worst single call by a referee I saw all weekend. Did you see this spot on 3rd and 1 where Houston is driving to tie the game? They're like inside the 10-yard line. Yeah. They run it on 3rd and 1. The guy makes it by half a yard at least. Is spotted short, so it's 4th down, and then they get stuffed on 4th down. This is under a minute. Like, Houston is literally driving to force overtime or go for 2 and win. Who knows what you do there in that situation. You're at home and you're the underdog. I think you probably should do that. Maybe the bigger story, though, is Quinn Ewers getting hurt. Sounds like he'll be out for several weeks. Malik Murphy didn't exactly light the world on fire when he came in, but I think they still feel good about him going forward. Not that he played much in this game, but yeah, I don't know. Do you have any more thoughts other than what I just said? Like, Texas kind of got the benefit of the doubt here from the referees, and this game should not have been this close.
Fair enough. I think that there is an element of just surviving and advancing. This is, I think that I think that's what teams like Texas and Oklahoma also kind of went through the same thing, right? You just have to get through, and you attempt to make it not super stressful for your fans. Like, some of these games are just going to be close. This is the Big 12. Like, what are we expecting here? So I wasn't that swayed by it. I think that the injury to Ewers is probably a bigger deal than this game itself. At the end of the day, Texas won the game. They were 1-0 on Saturday. But that injury, I think, is a big deal for them going forward. I think that's a problem. Arch Manning watch, possibly. I know that. I know we're only an injury away. We'll just say that we are one injury away from seeing meaningful Arch Manning snaps And I'm here for it, man. I'm here for it. That could be fun.
A team that would have loved to just walk away with an ugly win on Saturday was North Carolina. They were 6-0, number 10 in the country, and they faced Virginia, who is not good. And Virginia wins this game 31-27. And it wasn't particularly fluky either. Like, North Carolina won the turnover battle. Yeah, what do you say about this? Like, other than just Virginia's offensive line beat North Carolina up, and North Carolina couldn't figure it out.
So, okay, North Carolina was a top 10 team. Virginia was 2-5. Well, they are 2-5 now. Going into this game, they had one win on the year.
Yeah.
That was at home versus William and Mary, and you beat them by 14 points. You had lost to Boston College, NC State, and James Madison prior to that. James Madison actually probably the best of those three teams. That's not the point.
Right.
Your one win was against William and Mary. Virginia is not a good football team.
No.
And we had North Carolina ranked at 10 at their place. Makes no sense to me. North Carolina, that's a big enough. Okay, upsets happen. They do happen. But this is the equivalent of, I don't know if we want to say Alabama losing to Vanderbilt, but kind of close. This year it is. This year it's kind of the equivalent of Alabama losing to Vanderbilt.
Pretty close.
And yeah, it's I don't know. North Carolina was clearly a flawed team the whole time, but that's an embarrassing loss, and they are lucky to still be ranked in the top 25, in my opinion. Like, that's a loss bad enough to be like, there's real questions about North Carolina.
Yeah, they gave up 228 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns on the ground to this Virginia team, which you have to think that that's the type of weakness that other teams will see and exploit. So who knows? I mean, it's still out there for North Carolina. They can still win the ACC, like,
sure, if
they figure it out. But that's pretty ugly, and there's not a whole lot else to say about it. Ole Miss beat Auburn 28-21. I didn't get a lot of eyes on this one. What are your thoughts on this game, Ashton?
Yeah, survive in advance in a week where certain teams that we just mentioned did not survive in advance, or a team like Oklahoma that had to, survive a 2-point conversion. This was a 7-point win at Auburn at night. There's crazy things that happen at Auburn, and you were not one of the casualties. Ole Miss survived. They advanced. Good for them. They were the better football team. I watched this game, a fair amount. I think Ole Miss they're sneaking up on people. They have one loss. They beat LSU. They lost to Alabama. Alabama's a good football team. Ole Miss is sneaking up on people. They have one loss. They will play Georgia here in a couple of weeks. They go to Georgia right after Georgia gets Missouri, right? So, like, kind of in between Missouri and Tennessee, Ole Miss is just sandwiched, just right in there, just sitting in there. I think that's a sneaky game. I think Ole Miss is pretty good. I really do. I think they're growing into it.
Yeah, they're having a good season. Auburn, on the other hand, like, just check back with me this offseason when they get whatever quarterback they get, because they're unserious right now because of the quarterback position. They're not a complete team or anywhere close to it. That's what happens sometimes when you take over a program that didn't recruit very well the couple years before you got there. So Kansas State beats TCU 41-3. Just absolutely demolished them. Kansas State, they played both quarterbacks in this game. Will Howard and Avery Johnson both played well. Maybe that's a thing going forward. Like, maybe they have one of the few, like, 2 quarterback systems that complement each other well, and both are productive. Josh Hoover, the new TCU starting quarterback, a week after blowing out BYU, he comes out and throws for 4.3 yards per attempt, no touchdowns and a pick. So I don't know. TCU is just weird, and Kansas State's pretty good yet again. So is there more to say than that?
No, it's the Big 12, dude. It's the Big 12. Like, we could expect BYU to come out next week and beat someone, and having just lost to they got blown out by TCU. TCU just turns around and gets blown out by Kansas State.
Well, speaking of that, BYU beats Texas Tech 27-14. It's just weird. The Big 12 is fun to pay attention to if for no other reason. You never know what's going to happen going into a game.
Right.
So
it's like the NFL. Yeah.
Yeah. Florida State beat Duke 38-20. I was a little surprised to see Riley Leonard actually play in this game. Yeah. He did go out with injury in the second half. Duke was up 20-17 and then didn't score in the second half. Due in large part, obviously, to Riley Leonard going down. His backup, Beelan, 1 of 6 for 7 yards. Duke just, they have zero threat of passing the ball when they don't have Leonard. And it's not even that Riley Leonard is that great of a passer. It's just that you at least have to respect it if he's out there. And Florida State figured him out. They were able to stop the run then once Leonard was out. And they have a good offense. They put up 38 points. Florida State, I mean, why not Florida State this year? Like, why can't they win the ACC? Why can't they go to the playoff? Why can't they scare some teams while they're there?
They can do all of that. I don't think anyone's saying that they can't do that. I do think that when Riley Leonard was in this football game, I mean, okay, here's another thing. Duke led in the fourth quarter. Like that,
yeah, that's true.
It looks like a blowout now. Duke was leading by a field goal going into the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
If Riley Leonard plays or say he's healthy, let's just say he's 100% healthy, Florida State has a real fight on their hands. I'm not saying that they win that game. I'm not saying they lose that game. I'm saying that that's a close football game. I think Duke was impressive to me, and Florida State was the second most physical team for large chunks of that game. And there's no doubt that it changed. Like once Leonard left, the momentum changed, and Duke was not nearly as complete, and Florida State just didn't respect him as much on offense, and they were able to do a few more things, and Duke never scores again, right? But the score line of Florida State winning by 18 points and covering, I believe, is not at all indicative of how close this football game was for most of it.
Yeah. Florida State has a very real chance of making the playoff, and I was trying to talk them up there. But the fact is, if you're making a power rating system, you probably have them around 10 or 12 as opposed to top 4.
What's the difference between Florida State and North Carolina? Like you could argue that those are, I mean, they're, you know what I mean? Like they both wins, but the floor feels low. Like they both have decently high ceilings, but even with Florida State, like it does feel that if Florida State would play Michigan tomorrow, like Michigan would probably get after them. Like Michigan would be a favorite, and in my opinion, a fairly large favorite if they'd play Florida State tomorrow. So they are good. They'll probably win the ACC. They're a favorite to do so. But there's a difference between that and being competitive in a playoff game or a championship game.
Yeah, I would agree with you. All right, speaking of Michigan, they beat Michigan State 49-0. Rivalry game there, but my main takeaway is just that it feels like Michigan State is on quit watch.
Like you just think they're on quit watch? I thought they already have.
Yeah, they might have. Yeah, you're right.
Agreed.
Just maybe fade them the rest of the year. I don't know. We'll see.
Right. Sure.
All right, a big upset. Not necessarily a huge spread, but big for this program. Miami beats Clemson 28-20 in double overtime.
Oh
man. You want to start with Miami or Clemson on this one?
So if we would have the losing fan base was going to be absolutely desperate, right? It was going to not look good for either team, whichever team lost. And that desperation is kind of what makes college football, I guess, is, it feels so hopeless sometimes. The one thing that I wanted to kind of really circle in on, and this one's on us because we spent all off season hyping this thing up, man.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Garrett Riley to Clemson thing, it's not it right now, man. Like it's been a struggle, and that offense hasn't looked fantastic. So I guess that means we'll start with the Clemson part of it, because I mean they've won 2 national championships in the last couple of years. They're 4-3. Like they could lose more. Like I don't know. It's concerning. Like it's in double overtime. I don't know. Miami was the better team in the overtimes. Like there's no doubt there. This was to a backup quarterback. This was not Tyler Van Dyke that was playing for Miami either. You know what I'm saying? Like
This was Mario Cristobal's first home win in the ACC.
Against Clemson. Against Clemson. He couldn't get it against Georgia Tech, but man, he'll go get one against Clemson.
The story of the game, you know how Josh Pate likes his padlock stats? Here's his padlock stat for you. Yards per rush.
Yeah.
Miami, 5.6. Clemson, 0.9.
Yeah.
How's that possible? Clemson is not known for great offensive line play, but it feels like it's worse this year. Like, it's not good. And the receivers obviously are not great either. I don't know. Like, you just gotta go to the portal, man. Like, you gotta go grab a few offensive linemen this offseason and maybe a wide receiver or two as well. I don't know that we can. I don't necessarily feel like I was wrong about Garrett Riley. Like, I still think that's a great hire.
Okay.
The personnel doesn't quite match, and I'm also not sure if Dabo's letting him cook.
Well, that is fair. I mean, there were some concerning press conferences early on,
Yes.
right? Like Dabo said, Riley will run the Clemson offense, and it was like, no, that's not. Like, we wanted him to run the good offense, the one that he was running. Like, we didn't want him to come and have to run yours.
Yeah.
No, there's no doubt. Did you think anything about Klubnik? Did you watch the game probably on that last on the in overtime, that fourth down play when Klubnik keeps it out to the left?
That was rough.
He had no chance. I mean, just no shot. It was.
But by the way, like,
tough.
I understand his mindset. I think, like, if you're averaging 0.9 yards per carry, I totally get it. If you're like, I don't know that I can trust this and let it go here because we've been getting stuffed all night.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I guess props to Miami. Like, obviously last week they did lose to North Carolina a week after losing to Georgia Tech the way they did.
Right.
Clearly, Mario hasn't lost the team. Like, clearly they showed up and played hard. They have a really good freshman edge rusher who's excellent. They have talent on that team. Like, if he can, this is a huge if, but if he can figure the offense out going forward, like, they can be a legitimate threat to win ACC titles going forward. They absolutely can.
Well, they recruit at a level that enables them to do so, right? Like, I would agree with you there too. I think what was the devastation that we saw from Miami, like the players, and this was after the Georgia Tech game, right? Like, there's the video of the linemen just like what are we doing out there? Like, why aren't we taking knees? And hey, Miami's only 5-2. Like, for all the negativity that's been around that program after losing to North Carolina and Georgia Tech, they come out, beat Clemson. They're 5-2. Like all's not lost for them. They have some good wins on the season. Yeah, I don't know. That is definitely, especially with the way they're recruiting, all you're looking for is a little bit of positivity out, on the field to kind of complement that recruiting, right? And wins like beating Clemson, that will do it for you. Like, that gets the fan base riled up. That keeps momentum there. And they need it. They need some more people to fill those seats.
Yeah. Well, we've talked a lot about teams that have some holes in their team. Utah beats USC yet again, 34-32. Their fourth consecutive win against USC. In the offseason, I thought that I kind of opined that there's a pretty good chance that USC figures out their Utah problem. Clearly, they still haven't figured out their Utah problem. And this is without Cam Rising, who it was announced will not play this season, which is, not shocking really to anybody.
Right.
Bryson Barnes, pretty good game here, 10.2 yards per attempt and 3 touchdowns, which I guess that's just what teams do against USC. Like, I guess you're just able to put up points and yards in bunches against USC. I'm not really down on Caleb Williams. Like, I know there's a lot of people out there like, I don't know if he'll be the number one pick. Like, he's going to be the number one pick. He's good. He's maybe not a perfect quarterback, but who is? But just from the big picture standpoint, it has to happen this offseason, right, Ashton? Like, this is finally the offseason where Lincoln Riley actually fires his defensive coordinator and goes and hires somebody who doesn't suck, namely Alex Grinch.
I mean, we've thought this for the last 4 years, right? Like how is this different than anything we've seen before? I agree with you. I'm just trying to, I guess, figure out what's the difference between this offseason and last one. Like he was the problem last year too. Like that's the reason they didn't make the playoff last year. No, I agree with you completely. It's a team. They have major flaws. There's no question. They could maybe run the ball a little bit more. Like
Yeah.
their running backs. Lloyd had 86 yards on 7 carries.
Yeah.
Like that's not enough. Marshawn Lloyd was good in the SEC. Like that's a good running back.
Mm-hmm.
Like yeah, feed him the ball, take a little bit off Caleb Williams. Did you see Caleb's what did you think of Caleb's body language as that game ended? Did you and to be fair, the camera was all over him. Like they were panning to him every other shot. Like every other shot was Caleb Williams. Was he just being stoic? Or like it was he clearly was a little distraught, but he covered it up quite well and almost came with like I don't care energy just a little bit.
I don't know. I'm not the body language genius over here. He's not a personality that I like. Like he's not. I wouldn't find it easy to root for him. Like if I was completely neutral, which obviously I'm not. I'm a Notre Dame fan, but
right.
I don't know. On one hand, you got to give it to the guy. Like without him, USC would struggle to make a bowl game this year. Like quite frankly, he is carrying them on his back. It reminds me a little bit of like 2009 Notre Dame with Jimmy Clausen and Charlie Weiss's last year, where their offense would just they'd go get the lead late in the fourth quarter, and then their defense would just immediately turn around and give it right back to their team. Like he is carrying their team all by himself. He's got some decent receivers and some decent running backs and absolutely nothing on defense. It is horrible. Their offensive line is not good this year. I can't blame the guy too much for feeling a little. It would just be hard to know how to feel exactly if you were in that situation. So he's got a few games left in a USC uniform, and then he's going to be gone, and they're going to lose several more. Like at least one more, probably 2, maybe 3. So
they you know who they still have to play. I mean, they still have to play Washington and Oregon and UCLA. I mean, they're not going to be favored probably in any of those games. Maybe the UCLA game, maybe, but yeah, no, I mean, they could easily lose 3 more games. I agree with you. Quick shout out, by the way, to Barry Alexander, who, when he transferred from Georgia to USC, said that USC was going to have just as good, if not better, defense than what he had left at Georgia. Just a quick shout out there. And not that I'm bitter or anything, just throwing that one out there. Yeah.
You're saying the guy who played for 4 different high schools in 4 years might not be working out so well on a second stop in college.
I didn't say that. That's not what I said. I was just saying that, he was part of an extraordinary defense. And just to say that, USC and Alex Grinch just going from not Dan Lanning, but Glenn Schumann and Will Muschamp, Kirby Smart, to Alex Grinch as defensive coaches must be shocking. Must just be wild. Yeah.
Right. Utah, by the way, shout out to them. They might win the Pac-12 again. Who knows? Like it, I don't think they will, just because they're not as good as Oregon and probably Washington, but I'll say Oregon and Washington. I have to give props to Washington because they did beat Oregon. Although Washington squeaking by Arizona State this week, 15-7, not exactly inspiring confidence, but apparently they have an Arizona State problem. They've lost to them more like 13 of the last 15 times or something stupid like that.
Wow.
UCLA takes care of business against Stanford, 42-7 there. The underhit. So that's what I was looking at. So